Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be kidnapping someone we suspect of being an alien in Bugonia and then fighting for survival in a post-apocalyptic wasteland in the second season of Fallout. But before all of that, Nick, do you have something to recommend to our listeners?
Well, as ever, I love to watch the shows which have a bit of buzz to try and feel like a relevant critic with his finger on the televisual pulse. So this fortnight, I have been watching Heated Rivalry, the erotic romance hockey show, which aired, I believe, originally on the small Canadian channel Crave, but has now spread across the entire Western world and recently landed on Now TV and Sky in the UK. In case you've missed the phenomenon, this is the story of two hockey players from rival teams who find themselves irresistibly drawn together in a passionate love affair. This slowly grows from I believe the kids would call it a situationship, into something much deeper and more romantic over the course of 6 drama-filled episodes. Drama-filled and also lengthy sex scene-filled. So yeah, I've seen this. I'm aware that I'm not sure the world was really waiting for a straight man with slightly sarcastic inflections to do a review of Heated Rivalry, so there is perhaps a limit to how much I need to say it was good. Yes, it's very good at what it does. My partner, who is more into straight romance, as in straight up romance fiction rather than straight romance, this is obviously queer romance. My partner, who is more into romance than I, wanted to watch it. I want to, again, see what all the fuss is about, so I checked it out, and yeah, it's really good. It does the interesting job of building the romance around their sort of hockey rivalry and also sort of slowly moving from what starts off as this sort of very sex-focused erotic romance. Like, this show has a reputation for its, really explicit sex scenes. A lot of them are in, like, the first 3 episodes. There's a definite feeling as the show moves on of the tone sort of shifting towards something you'd slightly more call a standard romance. Like, if you just watched the last 2 episodes, certainly, of Heated Rivalry, you'd probably come away thinking, I don't know what all the fuss is about. There's barely any sex in it.
That's interesting. That's interesting in terms of structure.
Yeah, I did actually also listen to a podcast called Tonsil Hockey, which is a very, very detailed breakdown of Heated Rivalry by the comedians Olga Koch and Catherine Bohart, which, if you want a much more heavily invested review of the show, rather than the sort of analytical stuff I do, then go and listen to that, because they are very much here to talk in detail about Shane and Ilya's feelings in every given scene. But yeah, they were a bit sort of, I still love the last couple of episodes, but where's all the sex gone? And who knows, maybe it was time, maybe it was budget, maybe they just felt that the move of their relationship from mostly sex to something a bit deeper is being reflected in, the amount of the runtime that is being spent on sex. I don't know.
It sounds more like a character arc thing. I mean, I've not seen the show, but that does sound like a sort of character progression, sort of mapping on how relationships go. They evolve from something physical into something more emotional.
Yeah, and that's certainly the case here. Although there's always a certain amount of tenderness to it. I mean, the show is called Heated Rivalry, and when they first get together, it's kind of reflected as part of their rivalry. They're having sex, they're also trash-talking each other. A lot of their sort of sexy banter is in the form of, like, hockey trash talk in the beginning. And it sort of, again, evolves as things go along, and you get more into their backgrounds and their emotional lives.
I was wondering, why do you think this has sort of captured people's imagination so much to go viral? Is it just that there's a shortage of queer romantic dramas and people have just latched onto this one because it's good? Is it doing something, I guess, like particularly well, or I don't know, a way it's been marketed or something like that? Because it's really come from nowhere. Like I say, it's not like a big prestige thing made by HBO or even like on a big like American network, like a lot of sitcoms or whatever.
It probably is mostly that there aren't that many shows that are both, firstly, straightforward romance in this sort of very sincere way, and queer romance as well, but are done this well, and this unironically and sincerely. There's no subverting anything or making fun of the tropes here. It's just a romance story done dead straight. Dead straight, yeah, there we go again. Yeah, just really straight up romance. And yeah, I think there hasn't been necessarily that much full embracing of that in this current way. It feels very, I was going to say of the now, but then again, a lot of it takes place over actually quite a long period of time. I think the show actually just takes place over about 10 years, showing the slow evolution of their relationship. So, yeah, it's not necessarily relevant in terms of taking place right now, but it does feel like it's satisfying a need that a lot of other things are not crying out to satisfy. Again, maybe partly because, people talk about the lack of rom-coms nowadays, which I guess were the main acceptable form of romance in popular culture for a long time. And I guess, as well as being less rom-coms, there's just less romance in general.
Less romantic dramas, things like that. People really latched onto things like The Notebook There was a film a few years ago. I mean, it sounds similar to something we discussed on the podcast, which is that TV shows like Netflix and, well, stuff that could be streamed. And I think most people in the world who've consumed Heated Rivalry have consumed it as like a streaming show on a platform that isn't the one it was originally broadcast on. And streaming shows seem to be filling this niche that people have for the Hollywood sort of non-AAA mega blockbusters that don't really get done anymore. Things like smaller romantic dramas, rom-coms, straight-up comedies. There we go with straight again. Straight-up comedies and, historical dramas, things like that. Or even science fiction that's not a big superhero thing or, adaptation of like a classic novel like Dune. So there does seem to be the sort of film of the week that Hollywood used to do more of has now gone to streaming. And I guess probably that's the same with the romance genre. But this one's also, I guess, captured people's views of being quite contemporary by being a queer story, which I guess is reflecting people's interests and identities in the present.
Yes, plus, it's perhaps quite embarrassing that this is such a noted point, but it does use things like texting and sexting and the modern uses of technology very well in telling its story, which not a lot of shows do.
Yeah, it's reflecting everyday life experiences in this day and age, and they're sort of reflecting modern romance. And texting is something that film and TV has really struggled to actually portray and seen it done quite clunkily. I mean, to be fair, the BBC show Sherlock actually was quite innovative in that it did handle that quite well. I remember a lot of people pointing out actually it's quite good at incorporating like sort of digital media into stories. And that's something that like novels and lots of mediums have struggled with. It's bizarre that we've been texting pretty intensely for like 25 years. It's a civilization, but our media really is bad at reflecting that.
I mean, the thing is, romance is a lot about their emotions and stuff, so you can maybe get a bit more. I think one of the reasons visual media has struggled a bit with incorporating the increasing dominance of texting and messaging as our communication method is because it's visually not that fascinating to show endless images of your characters staring at phones. But if you're doing romance, then you can, if you do it well, as they do here, get still a lot of tension out of the characters' expressions and emotions and exact phrasings as they wrestle with their texts. I'm not saying this entire show is just people intensely texting. As I say, there's also a lot of sex. But, but it is something they do well here.
Yeah. And I guess everyone can relate to that. You've texted someone that you're interested in or flirting with or whatever, and they've not texted back, or they've sent you something that isn't what you anticipated or was hoping for, and you're trying to read between the lines and things like that. So I guess it's quite a relatable situation to put people in. It's interesting. This is probably like the first big viral hit of the year.
Yeah.
Was it been talked about before Christmas? It felt like this has been building for a while, but now it's reached absolute crescendo.
I don't think it was added to UK streaming till early January, but it was, I think, building on the American side since sometime in December, yeah.
I definitely heard people talking about it. American and queer friends talking about it before Christmas, but in a sense of when are we going to get to see it? Yeah, for the avoidance of doubt, American friends living in the UK for international listenership, which I'm sure is vast. Also, I suppose the element of anticipation, I've seen it, discussed on Instagram and YouTube way before it was even available here, I suppose. That has kind of been the best marketing campaign you could have for a show, even though it's just kind of been word of mouth, but word of mouth building for quite a long time, and then people finally getting to see it. And I guess it not disappointing when people did get to see it.
Well, yeah, obviously, yes. The big selling point here is it's good. If you want a sweet and also erotic romance story done well without, a literary twist where it turns out to be a tragedy or something, or not done as a subplot in some bigger action story or whatever, then yeah, this is it. This is good.
Yeah, and also it seems to be what you said before, and you just reminded me of then, is that something we pointed out is I think there's a hunger for people to do things without a nod and a wink and a sense of irony. I mean, I feel that the postmodern irony has kind of been pretty much tapped out, or just people are just a bit tired of it, and then that's reflected in the success of things like Dune as well, because Dune is very much we're just straight up doing the story, and there's not a hint of irony in the whole thing, and it's not self-conscious in any way. I feel we've pointed that out in quite a lot of different things we've reviewed, that it's interesting that there's no sense of irony in this. And yeah, I guess this is probably a similar thing. This is in the kind of people relating to this in the post-irony world, because they want to just see a traditional romance story but done in a modern way without a wink and a nod to the audience.
Yeah, no, this show definitely commits with its whole heart. It's very sincere in that way. And also, yeah, as you were saying, not only is it not from a massive network, it's also genuinely on quite a low budget. There are quite a few moments which even I noticed when first watching it, where it's like, okay, they're working around the low budget here, aren't they? This press conference scene is just the two of them sat at a table with some off-camera reporter babble noise being played. They can't afford like a room full of extras, that sort of thing. All the ice rink scenes when they go on tour are clearly the same ice rink. Yeah, there's a lot of working around a quite low budget. Like, there's not actually that much hockey action in Heated Rivalry, which is fortunate because obviously that's not the sort of action we're here for. But also, I don't think they could afford to film that much hockey action.
No, exactly. Pack out a stadium with extras. And also the fact they have the issue that, like, well, I don't know to what degree it was originally made at an audience who's more interested in hockey. I know that Canadians fucking love hockey. It's like their national obsession. I guess, like, if you're going to make a football queer romance show in the UK, people relate in the same way. But I guess what's helped to go viral is that, not many people know the rules of hockey or the conventions or things like that. I mean, you whack the little puck thing into a goal as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I guess like the fact there's not much hockey in it means people aren't getting confused by hockey rules or conventions.
Yeah, be interested to see when someone tries to do the football/soccer version of Heated Rivalry to try and poach the audience domestically. I'm sure someone somewhere is pitching it as we speak.
I could imagine, we're going to get a lot of Heated Rivalry clones as this has been a huge success.
Yeah, you think so, but it'd be interesting to see how many actually have, the courage to actually go full, okay, it's a queer romance story and we're doing actual full-on sex scenes with it. Or how many chicken out on one or both of those things. We'll have to wait and see.
Interesting.
So, yep, there we go. I have been watching Heated Rivalry because I am extremely cool and relevant. Alistair, what have you been doing?
So I've been catching up with some films from a few years ago, as discussed in the last episode of the podcast. Yeah, I've got another quiet Japanese film to recommend. I will watch something else at some point. But what I'm here to talk about is Evil Does Not Exist, which is the film that won the top prize at the London Film Festival in 2023. It's a sort of drama. Yeah, it's one of those sort of strange films that's kind of hard to classify. It's a drama set in a sort of small rural Japanese community, the conflict between the locals and this business that want to build a glamping site on the edge of their town. And this business really doesn't care to the local people, objecting to the damage this will do to their wildlife and water supply. It's a really interesting film because you get to see this sort of conflict from both sides. You see it from the perspective of sort of the townspeople who are opposed to this, but also these two PR experts, I guess, who is dispatched to the town in order to convince people on behalf of the company. The company cares little for the local people or their objections to the scheme, but it's interesting to see the two PR people sort of, wrestling with the whole, they have some reasonable objections to this, but we've been told by our boss that we've got to win them round one way or another. But it's quite a bit of conflict in the film, but again, it's a quiet film of people having measured but tense conversations. There's a lot of interesting drama in it, so I can see why it did well on the festival circuit.
Okay, but it doesn't climax in them trying to blow up the glamping site with a bomb or anything.
No, it doesn't end like that. It doesn't quite end like that, although it does really escalate towards the end. It's, I guess I'm trying to avoid too many spoilers. But there is a real sort of escalation. There's a sort of plot in the second half when the child of someone from the town goes missing, and there's a sort of this hunt for this child in the wilderness. So there is a sort of escalation, and then there's a quite dramatic finale. Yeah, so it is a real build. I mean, it's one of those films, I think it's just a bit over 2 hours, and similar to Perfect Days we talked about in the last episode, there's probably about as much plot as an average episode of The Simpsons or something, something that's very plot dense. But it kind of unfolds in this sort of kind of slow, well-paced way, and there's a really lot of focus on like the characters and their emotions. I mean, it is one of those art house films that kind of hit some of the tropes of being an art house film in that it's quite quiet, there's not a lot of dialogue, there's not even a lot of like, music as well. There's sort of quite a lot of shots of people like trekking through the wilderness, hunting, being in nature, things like that. So it's a sort of slow build that is very much a thing at art house cinema, doing something very different from what like a Hollywood film does.
Okay, it doesn't sound quite as chill as Perfect Days did.
No, there's a real like tension. Perfect Days is one of those films when it's just like a really nice character, really just like kind of revel in their life. Yeah, this is on many ways a much colder film. I mean, literally it's set in a sort of snowy tundra. But yeah, there's a sort of difficult emotions and people talking to the people in the town and how their life will be ruined by this glamping business. It's difficult to describe. It's a film with a lot of tension and conflict in it. I guess it's tapping into a lot of things I think that are quite universal in the conflict. They're like these small communities that are quite poor all over the world and are affected by big business that doesn't care about them, whether it's mining or road building, or in this case it's like glamping. There's a glamping site, and the sort of how these businesses don't care about these communities and they have very little say in their future and they feel quite alienated and isolated. I mean, I watched Sean Barker's Red Rocket a couple of years ago, and that's set in Louisiana or somewhere like that in America, and it's a similar vibe, although that movie is more of there's a lot more drama in it because it's not an understated Japanese movie, and it's a bit of a comedy and is kind of also about the porn industry. I mean, it's a different film, but like the whole thing's just filled with the shots in the background of these like enormous oil refineries, and it's the backdrop is very much the conflict between big business and these small communities that are steamrolled by them.
I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? The community fighting back against the big company that's come to bulldoze the school or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things you see depicted in lots of different cultures and in a way that's quite representative of that culture. Yeah, Red Rocket, although it's not a Hollywood film, so it's quite American in the sense that like it's about these sort of loud, larger-than-life characters in some way. And this film feels very Japanese in that there's a lot of quiet and silence in the film, so again, important part of Japanese culture. Yeah, the people are quite understated, and although they make their points and they defend their community with passion and conviction, but not with like screaming or throwing things, just with this sort of Japanese intensity. So yeah, it's reflecting these wider conflicts we see in global society.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of, I don't know, and I guess I'm possibly talking more about Western cultural trends without really knowing if this has been reflected in Japanese culture, but it felt like maybe there's something about like an evil corporations come to threaten the town is something that might have seemed a bit rote 10, 12 years ago, but has maybe come back into fashion a bit due to how much we all now hate tech companies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same arguments are deployed, like the company's very much like, oh, it'll bring employment into the area, it will revitalize your economy, there'll be jobs, there'll be money from the tourists who come to stay, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, but it's going to be a blight on our landscape, and all the sewage is going to like just ruin our water and things like that. So yeah, I think people are familiar with these debates. This is a film from, and I should have looked this up beforehand, so I'm going to pronounce this really badly, but I think it's Raisuke Hamaguchi is a sort of famous Japanese director. I think this is his most recent film, but he hit the mainstream a few years ago with Drive My Car, which was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars in 2022 in the classic, the one non-English language film that's been nominated for Best Picture, and that won Best Non-English Language Film that year. And then he also did after that Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, which is a really interesting film as well. That's very good. Again, it's sort of got a quite interesting different narrative structure. It's quite different to traditionally structured films. So I do really like his films. I kind of want to go back and dig up some of the older ones at some point, but I can recommend his work.
Nice. So is this your warm-up to when you then just start running through the Oscar films, or are you doing that on the side?
Pretty much, yeah, this is all the warm-up. I've paid to reactivate my Mubi account, as I do every year, so I've been kind of watching stuff on Mubi that is available. However, actually, brief plug, Evil Does Not Exist is also available on BBC iPlayer, so you don't have to pay for Mubi if you want to watch it. They put quite a few films on BBC iPlayer recently. I don't know, maybe it was shown on TV over Christmas on BBC 4 or something, so it's up there for free for people to watch. But yeah, I'm going through my Mubi films, partly because I kind of felt last year I wasn't across art house cinema enough. Went to the theatre a lot last year, which was very nice, and you can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. But yeah, although we covered all like the big blockbusters and a lot of interesting stuff that made waves on the podcast, I kind of felt that like maybe time to catch up on some arty films. So yeah, hence Perfect Days and Evil Does Not Exist. Yeah, we need to get stuck into Oscar films. I'm sure we will do in a minute or so.
That's also coming right up, yes.
Yes, I'm excited to dive into the other bits and pieces for the Oscars as well. So yeah, in the next few episodes, you're getting lots of Oscar opinions, I'm sure.
And speaking of films that are nominated for Best Picture in the current Oscars, it's time to review Bugonia, a new movie by Yorgos Lanthimos starring Jesse Plemons as a conspiracy theorist who recruits his confused cousin to kidnap a tech CEO who he believes to be an alien. He then proceeds to lock her in his basement. The CEO is played by Emma Stone, and then what follows is a series of dramatic head-to-head conversations between them in which they both try to outplay each other, and yes, the mind games escalate to inevitably a surreal real strange climax, as you kind of expect from a Yorgos Lanthimos film. I say this as if I'm a cinephile. I have seen literally just poor things, but that was really weird. Anyway, we have seen this film. Alistair, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I really like this. I was just saying about Evil Does Not Exist. There's a sort of variety of art house film that's slow and quiet. This is it's a very art house film. It's got some interesting narrative tricks and things like that, and tonal shifts that I'm sure we'll come to. But it's also, this is an art house film that's really, really tense. Yeah, obviously it's like a hostage drama situation, with a person whose mental health is very much in question, and there's violence, so it's really tense. But what I liked the most about it is it's very political, and it's got a lot to say about modern politics. Primarily, I think it's a big metaphor for how people reach for these big, blunt instruments, political blunt instruments, to solve their problems, such as the far right or QAnon conspiracies, or even just supporting Donald Trump. It's kind of very much about how desperate people whose lives are rubbish basically reach for these big things as a way to kind of make sense of the world, but told through the metaphor of this guy's belief in that the world is run by Andromedans who control everything. It's really interesting, very political film.
Yeah, no, it's very good at channeling its satire through this sort of quite tense standoff between the two of them. As I say, it's one of these films where the bulk of it is a series of head-to-heads between the two main characters, and you're just seeing the power dynamic sort of shift back and forth between them as they both try to outplay each other, The Jesse Plemons character is, for the most of the film, certainly played as a fairly straight-up, slightly unstable conspiracy theorist, and the Emma Stone character is a tech CEO somewhat from the Succession school of evil rich person. She is not particularly sympathetic. So, yeah, it's mostly as watching these two people try to, manipulate each other in this sort of high-stakes environment, where, as you say, a lot of satirical elements built in about, what Emma Stone does is arguably very bad. On the other hand, the sort of things that Jesse Plemons is into are also contributing to the downfall of society in their way. So it just sort of ping-pongs back and forth between them.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the point about sympathy, is that the Emma Stone character is very interesting because in some way you're sympathetic for her because she's, an ordinary person in the sense where, she's not an unhinged conspiracy nut job. She's someone living her life and gets kidnapped and locked in a basement and threatened. And throughout the film, the Jesse Plemons character, it becomes more apparent how dangerous he is and how unhinged he is. But also at the same time, other than the fact that she's literally in a hostage situation in prison, she's also a really not very sympathetic character. You can tell even when she's trying to speak to him and be yes, I understand and hear your grievances or things. She's just trying to manipulate him as much as possible. So yeah, I thought the way it had these complex characters and played with your sympathy for them, it's definitely a morally and emotionally complex film, especially in the fact that Jesse Plemons' character, it really showed that he's been through a lot of shit life. His mum was abusive and put a lot of these conspiracy thoughts in his head, clearly. There's even a bit with a sort of a local cop who used to be his babysitter who clearly did some form of abuse. It's never really particularly specified, but it's quite good. It's hinted at subtly, but clearly some form of abuse when he was babysitting him, and he kind of lives by himself over just with his cousin in this sort of isolation, and you feel that he's a violent nut job, but also you feel sympathy for him because he's had a really hard life.
Yeah, I think it's with these sort of characters in these sort of comedy drama films, I guess, quite black comedy drama, it's easy to write them as caricatures, but I think there is some effort made to humanise Jesse Plemons, even if he is also obviously awful in many of the ways Alistair says. And it's impressive that they managed to make this film as, I guess, propulsive and gripping and entertaining as it is, considering that, it is in some ways just watching two awful people going at each other.
Again, there's not a huge amount of plot. It does, although it's tense and does move quite quickly, they spend a lot of time with each character, and there's a lot of, I guess, bits just clearly just building character, as well as bits that propel the plot forwards.
It's very stripped down. Almost all of it takes place inside the house where they're holding Emma Stone hostage, and it just cuts from one standoff between them to the other. There's these title cards saying, well, how many days it is till the lunar eclipse, sort of counting down to try and provide the sense of passing time, and this sort of builds to this alien intervention that the Jesse Plemons character thinks is coming on the lunar eclipse. But it's just showing them, again, going at each other in this sort of power struggle within this house. It's quite contained and intense. Part of me thinks it's maybe a bit long for something so straightforward, but the moment-to-moment execution is very good, so I don't necessarily know what you cut.
Exactly, yeah. What I liked about the Jesse Plemons character is that the kind of political arguments he makes are, they're spot on. He just has these sort of rambles about what the Andromedans have done to humanity and how they've fucked everything up, but he's kind of pointing out everything from even how his mum seems to have been first of all driven a bit mad and then put in a coma by being involved in drug trials, the community he's from. similar to what I was just saying about evil does not exist. This community that's on the edge of kind of like the modern world, it's very poor, it's very rural, clearly things are a bit rubbish. He kind of hints at like, several times he says like, no one cares about us, or no one cares about people like us. You know, society's collapsed. He talks about a lot about the environment and also damage done to the environment. And he's a beekeeper and talks about things like colony collapse, you know, things that are real. And like, he's got this list of like very real, like personal grievances about his life, and also like grievances about his community and how his community is treated, and also grievances about the world and the environment and the world we live in, and atomized tech and all these things like that. But he's focused it on, and aliens are responsible for all this, because he wants the simple answer, which is an interesting point about conspiracy theories. But also it makes him sympathetic, because like, I'm like, yeah, I kind of believe you, but you're also a nutter. But you're kind of right. And also it's interesting, he's got this grab bag of left-wing and right-wing grievances that are across the political spectrum expressed in different ways. So he's complaining about the environment, he's complaining about big business, he's complaining about drug companies, he's complaining about collapse of community, he's complaining about how his community is not valued or looked at. And like, he's not really, I mean, he does say at one point, as a sort of character monologue, that in a few years he churned through like every political ideology. He was like alt-right, you know, libertarian, Marxist, communist. He's been through all the ideologies before he settled on Andromedan aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that sort of like, again, his political grievances are genuine, and he's got a sort of grab bag of different things from like different parts of the spectrum. But yeah, he's all wrapped up in the fact of like, it's aliens. So I guess going back to people who want to be like, oh, it's QAnon, or like, oh, it's the deep state that Trump's fighting, or whatever. Or even, you know, people on the left who go like, oh, it's all big business. Or even, again, you get on the left, it's not as common as people say, but people go, oh, it's all Israel, or it's all, you know, and things like that. And like, it's conspiracy theories, and which is, hugely prevalent in today's society. But it's interesting that, he's, even though he's a violent nutter, he's got some legitimate grievances or whatever.
Well, yeah, and I guess, depending on how concerned you are with the ideology of everything, you could argue this is either he's making some point about how people who want an excuse to be violent will just find an excuse to be violent, or he's hedging his bets by saying, well, he's neither left-wing nor right-wing, or he's just crazy.
Yeah, well, I think all these different ideologies are responding to, like, sort of the same underlying grievances usually, like, especially like the alt-right and the radical left, is a lot of it are saying like, big business is too powerful, they're destroying communities, they're destroying the environment. I mean, we're all atomized, we're all lonely, we're all poor and emotionally wrecked, and like, different people maybe weigh up like the environment or community cohesion more than the other, depending on the side of the spectrum. But it's a list of grievances, it's just how they play out is the difference.
Yes, and here it plays out in the form of kidnapping, violence and aliens. Crucially, it's very watchable and exciting throughout. Do we want to spoil the ending, or do we want to leave space then spoil the ending?
I think we should definitely discuss the ending, but we'll leave some space, obviously. I guess the other thing I just want to say before we get to the ending is that I thought the character of the cousin was very interesting. He's clearly like, again, I'm not sure what the most sensitive or political correct way to put this, but he's got some sort of learning difficulty or something like that. He's clearly like a sweet, kind of decent person who just looks up to his cousin, but his cousin is like basically abusing him, like manipulating him, making him believe all the things he does. But like at one point, he like chemically castrates his cousin because they need it to protect themselves from Andromedan sex hormones or something like that. And it's really sad to watch, basically, this guy basically abusing someone who, is not completely with it and defaults to like just kind of loving and respecting his cousin. Again, pretty much the only thing he has in the world. And I thought it was a well done relationship, and it's quite tragic. I just thought that was just another good element of the film.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is hard to talk around without spoilers, but it's one of those well-done subplots that sort of builds and builds and builds until it, suddenly erupts massively and becomes hugely significant in the events of the film.
And unexpected. I didn't see that twist coming.
I did not see that coming either. That was a jump out of my chair moment.
Yeah. It does also really play with your sympathies for the Jesse Clemens character, in that the way he treats his cousin, even though he's a violent nutter towards the Emma Stone character, you kind of see like she's the embodiment of all the problems in the world, but the way he treats his cousin is quite appalling. So it makes him less sympathetic in that way, even though also, he's had a hard life and his mother was very abusive and things like that, which shaped him. So
I don't really feel like the film is making that many excuses for the Jesse Plemons character. And Jesse Plemons is very good at playing these sort of characters. He has done other things, but a lot of his characters are in this vein of blank-eyed, slightly scary people.
Yeah. I think the previous film he did with Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos, Kinds of Kindness, he plays a sort of range of characters in that, but some of them are more sympathetic and away from his kind of teetering on psychopathy characters that he does very well. This is an interesting and emotionally complex film. Right, do we want to put the spoiler wall in and then jump to because I think it is definitely worth discussing the ending.
Yeah, we're going to discuss the ending of Bugonia. This has technically been out for, I think, several months at this point, so
Yeah.
I think we're going to go for it. If you're just planning to watch it now because it's been nominated for some Oscars, then obviously don't listen to this bit yet. The film is good. You can see the film in confidence. But now we're going to leave a gap. Here it is. There it was. Let's spoil the film.
Right, well, the first thing I just want to say, just to build yourself up, is that, this is a great film just about the sort of tense hostage situation, but we know it's a Yorgos Lanthimos film, so part of me is thinking, like, I'm waiting for there to be, like, a weird twist, and I'm waiting for there to be something more than just what there is. And also, he does violence really well. It's one of the interesting things that, like, Poor Things is a great film, and it kind of captures his visual style well, but in many ways, it's quite different to his other films. His other films usually have something horrific and violent in them as well, and I guess we're doing all the spoilers. What we alluded to before was there's a bit when the cousin just blows his head off for pretty much no reason. Well, there's a sort of reason, but like that's a really Yorgos Lanthimos signature of the sort of sudden explosion of violence in a quite disturbing way. So throughout this, I was waiting for something to drop.
Yeah, obviously the mounting tension in this for a lot of it is them fighting back and forth on the Jesse Plemons kidnapper thinks the Emma Stone CEO is an alien. Emma Stone is playing it as if she's, a normal woman who is occasionally humouring this guy by admitting to being an alien because she thinks it might somehow get him to let her go or give her the advantage. But at the back of your mind, as Alistair basically just said, you're thinking this is a movie by a director who has made quite surreal movies, one of which I've seen. The odds of this somehow having a weird or surreal ending where she does in some way turn out to be an alien is quite high. So for that reason, I will admit the twist, where that's exactly what happens, was not as big a shock to me as it could have been.
No. Although actually, I think there were moments when I was like, okay, so the way this is going, she's definitely an alien. And then like, there was one point when I was basically like, maybe they're not going to do that. And I had successfully like lured myself into like, no, it's going to be like a straight up film. And then like right at the end, it's like, oh yeah, she's an alien. She's the alien queen in their weird spaceship with some very interesting set design.
Some nice sort of retro sci-fi, vaguely classic Star Trek type set design, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of the last act of the film thinking, okay, I feel like either she's going to be an alien or there's going to be an ending where she may or may not be an alien in a sort of slightly strange way.
K-Pax is a film that does that. Oh, it's Brooklyn World, but anyway, yeah.
I'll have to take your word for it, but yeah. I don't know, I'm not saying I'm disappointed or anything by the ending, but partly the director's reputation and partly the fact that, I don't know, I've just seen, some posters and stuff for this film which seem to be pushing the this is a weird, surreal film angle a bit, to the point where I was a bit, okay. I don't feel like the film's just going to be two people arguing in a basement. I feel like it's going to go full weird at some stage.
Yeah. And, it doesn't disappoint.
No.
Yeah, when it does, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's always two stages to the sort of weird breakdown at the end. The last of which I almost don't feel the need to spoil, to be honest. But yeah, she turns out to be an alien, and then there's a further twist beyond that, which ends in this sort of weirdly beautiful, surreal sequence, which I actually found genuinely quite strange and unsettling, which did make up for the fact that I somewhat saw the other twist coming.
Yeah, that final moments of the film is a very, also Yorgos Lanthimos in tone. That's the tone that's very consistent, like, across quite a lot of his films. I quite liked how this actually mixed together quite a few of his films in some way, like the sort of weird set design and strange bits of like the alien ship is quite Poor Things, which goes in for really like the strange sets and costume design and visual weirdness. But a lot of his films, it's more like this tonal strangeness that kind of runs around these sort of like tonal shifts, like, yeah, into sudden violence is more of his like his signatures. This film reminded me a lot of Kinds of Kindness, which is his previous film, because he did like 2 in a year, Poor Things, then Kinds of Kindness. One of his big breakthrough films, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. The tone of this is much more similar to that, in that it's kind of got a weird, unsettling edge to it, followed by just some moments of extreme violence.
Yeah, which is the sort of glaring tonal shift I occasionally enjoy.
Yeah, so it's well done here. And I think this is a really good summary of his style and things like that. I mean, it works really, really well. And yeah, the sort of element of it consistently getting like darker and weirder as it goes along. There's also, there's a few other twists. I suppose we mentioned that like before it's revealed that Emma Stone's an alien, they discover a hidden room in the house where it's kind of revealed that basically that Jesse Plemons' character is kind of a serial killer, in that this is not the first person that he's kidnapped and tortured. And there's also like body parts stored in formaldehyde and obsessive documentation of how he's tortured and killed these people. And it's a bit, I thought he was just like one nutter who just snapped and grabbed someone someday. Oh, he's actually been torturing and killing quite a few people. So yeah, there's an increasing twist of it getting darker and darker.
That was probably the part where I was most thinking, okay, maybe she's not an alien. Maybe he's baiting us with, okay, the weird twist is she's an alien, but actually the weird twist is he's a serial killer. That was, I think, a nicely played way of throwing us off the scent a little bit, because yeah, that was the part where I was most, okay, maybe he's going that way.
Yeah, I was exactly the same, yeah. Exactly the same. I guess it's our critic's head, or also as knowing the style of these things, where you're kind of thinking about how the film's playing with you and where it's going and like what it's going to do. But most people who are aware of the director's style and previous films will be probably having similar thoughts as they watch the film.
But yeah, it's one of the things that makes it work. Yeah, no, I thought this was really good. I don't know if it's a film that's really likely to win the Best Picture Oscar, but if you enjoy weird comedy dramas, it's a good one.
Yeah, it's probably a bit too strange maybe, but I don't know, it could win on the sense of that sometimes the unusual one does win, like Parasite. No one expected that to win, and it did. There's also the fact that it does have something really to say about politics and conspiracy theories and all of that stuff. Probably means that it might relate with people. I guess probably the big case against it is that a lot of the time the Oscars go for the least objectionable one, the one that it says not objectionable in the when like, oh, that was like offensive, whatever. It's like the one that everyone can kind of agree on, like, yeah, that was good. It was why you get a film sometimes like Green Book that no one was kind of like, wow, that's the most amazing film, but like people were kind of like, yeah, we can all agree that was pretty good. So yeah, whereas like films like this, like I can imagine a lot of people not liking this film. It's just too esoteric to be a kind of general all-round consensus, whereas like, again, I've never met anyone who didn't like Parasite.
Yeah, possibly, you're probably right. It's a bit too weird, but personally, had I actually seen this in 2025 when it came out, it would probably have snuck into the top 5 somewhere.
Yeah, certainly. And it's probably one of my favourite of the films I've seen with the Oscars. It's really good. I do really love Sinners and One Battle After Another. Yeah, good year this year. I guess we'll see how it shakes out with the other films, but I'm curious if any of the others will align quite so much with my interests as this film does.
Okay, and now, lastly today, it's time for the second season of Fallout, the hit video game adaptation from Amazon Prime. In this second season, Lucy, the naive young girl from the Vault, has teamed up with Walton Goggins' zombie cowboy the Ghoul to journey across the wastelands to try and track down her father, who is headed to New Vegas, a famous location from the games that I have not played, to try and bring him to justice for his crimes. We have seen the whole second season of this. Alistair, what did you think of it?
I thought this was all right. Yeah, there's sort of entertaining. Yeah, I mean, it does a good turn in drama and action and violence and things like that, with a sense of humour in the right places. It's an interesting world that it's set in, post-apocalyptic 50s world and things like that, with a sort of atom punk style, a lot of music and stuff from the period. I guess, like, when watching this, I was kind of thinking, like, people really love these video games. People really love the style and the world they're set in, and I'm just not getting it from this. Like, it's fine, it's all right. It's just, it kind of feels fairly standard post-apocalypse with a particular style. Mad Max is kind of post-apocalypse diesel punk. This is post-apocalypse atom punk. Yeah, like, I enjoyed it, but I just feel that the whole thing comes across as a bit mid, maybe, whereas, like, and I'm not really getting why people are so excited, unless the games are just, like, really, really fun shooters to play, and that's not being captured in this TV version.
My somewhat uninformed understanding is that the games are not the same story as this. This is just another story set in the world of the games. So they may well be quite different as an experience. I have not played them. I gather they're good. We know at least a few people who are very into them. I probably landed in about the same place to you on it, maybe a slightly further down the scale. I actually went back and listened to our review from last season, and the upshot seemed to be good execution, acting, world building. Kind of struggled to really care that much and get that invested. And to be honest, that's kind of where I landed this time too, only I think I may have cared even less. There's bits and bobs where I found myself a bit more interested. In general, most of the Ella Purnell, Walton Goggins plots and the stuff with Kyle MacLachlan as her dad broadly worked. Most of those scenes I was at least interested and somewhat feeling the dynamics. But yeah, whenever it cut away from those plots, I really did find myself struggling to care a huge amount. And I guess, again, we should probably hold back on the spoilers for at least a minute, but the last episode annoyed me on various levels.
Yeah, we'll get to the finale, but yeah, very much that, like, this TV show is kind of at its best when it's, Ella Purnell and Walter Goggins on screen. And I thought there's some good bits of Maximus, the sort of third main character. I only found myself really caring a lot about his plot when he was, teamed up with one or either of Walton Goggins or Ella Purnell. So the plot lines in the vaults and the plot line with the Ella Pennell character's brother, I just kind of felt a bit like not invested in those plot lines really at all. I mean, it doesn't help by the fact it's been a while between seasons, and those plot lines didn't register hugely emotionally for me before. When I think back about the show, it was basically like, oh, there was this kind of cool ghoul dude, and there was this like naive woman, like vault dweller, and she goes out into the world and goes on this character journey of becoming badass, and there's this guy who pretends to be a knight and he's not a knight, and then the rest of it is kind of like, I don't really remember, so difficult to get emotionally invested in. But like, again, Walton Goggins does a good line in sort of grizzled anti-hero, so yeah, he's always like very entertaining on screen. I feel like him and Ella Pennell are really like acting their maximum to make their bits as good as they can, where the rest of it is kind of a bit let down for being a bit generic post-apocalypse sci-fi.
As you say, I think they're quite invested in the aesthetic. I think they're clearly really trying to take this world from the games and bring it to life and put in a lot of the sort of fun, dark comedy beats that the game has. Or the game allegedly probably has. Again, not played them. And a lot of that stuff is done fairly well, and if you were a fan of the games, you might have got a bit more from it. I didn't personally, and I mostly just sat through it thinking, yeah, okay, some of these scenes are grabbing me a bit. I think the Maximus stuff did kind of feel like a lot of the stuff he was doing until the last couple of episodes where he re-intersected with the main storyline with Ella Pennell and Walton Goggins did feel like they were just killing time with him, to be honest. It didn't really seem like he was doing a lot for the first 6 or so episodes of this season.
Yeah, there was the bit with sort of the Brotherhood civil war. I kind of felt the Brotherhood are better as this sort of like villains on the edge of things, like this religious order of knights that go around killing people, sometimes children. The internal machinations of them is not particularly interesting.
Yeah, Kumail Nanjiani pops up at one point to do a guest appearance bit to spice up the Brotherhood storyline, and it's always nice to see him, I guess, but it didn't single-handedly save it for me.
Well, once again, I felt he was really like doing the bit to make his character interesting and entertaining and attention-grabbing, you know, with the thin material he'd been offered. As basically like, okay, well, I can at least invest this with some personality. Yeah, whereas like the rest of the Brotherhood plot lines, I can barely remember who the characters were or tell them apart because, you know, they didn't have his, you know, star power, his ability to be eye-grabbing and on screen, so he was good, but yeah, the material was given to work with, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit after the credits with the Brotherhood, which very much struck me as a, look everyone, we're doing the thing from the games scene, and I guess, you know, fair enough, if you're going to do something after the credits, I guess that's the place to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, similar to the last season when they introduced they were doing New Vegas for the next season. Also, similarly, like, I've not played the video games either, so I understand that some people who do really love the video games don't like this TV show. John from Many a True Nerd, who was on the podcast a while ago discussing Avengers, at least around the time the first season, was tweeting his disappointment with the TV show. He's a big fan of Fallout and has done a lot of YouTube content about them. But people really like the New Vegas game, and again, I just don't get it from this. Like, New Vegas just seems like everywhere else in this world. It's post-apocalyptic, rundown, there's big monsters. Yeah, I don't really get what makes it a special place compared to the rest of it.
I have to assume that, again, the game is just good because, yeah, it doesn't single-handedly come alive as a setting. I mean, again, because they're working around the game continuity and telling a different story, who knows, maybe if they'd done the story from the games.
Yeah, that's maybe it, yeah. It's a shame it's disappointing because I feel there's a lot of potential here. I guess there's like games that people like and there's an interesting world and there's a good aesthetic, but it doesn't quite come together, does it?
Yeah, no, not quite. Yeah, as you say, interesting world, good actors. There's a scene in the final episode with Ella Pennell and Kyle MacLachlan, which is really, really good. That's the climax of their storyline. That was a really good scene. As I say, some of that stuff with the main characters does land, but it's just so buried in stuff that didn't really land for me.
Yeah, and I did really like Kyle MacLachlan in this as well. I guess as a big fan of his oeuvre of slightly unsettling dudes from like Dune to like Twin Peaks. It's good to see him cropping up and clearly cashing in on that sort of reputation that he has. I mean, cashing in is a bit of like a harsh word. I don't mean it like that. And what I mean is more like the filmmakers are playing with this kind of perception people have of a Kyle MacLachlan character. Yeah, it's good to see him there, and I thought he's well cast. And again, like, yeah, one of the better things in the show, like the actors are well cast and they do, you know, the best of the material they're given. And at least his character is interesting.
Yeah, and for fans of slightly weird, borderline uncanny valley stuff, in some flashback scenes, he is de-aged to sort of Kyle MacLachlan in Twin Peaks age.
Yeah, I guess the older algorithmic de-aging.
I mean, I guess they've got, you know, plenty of material of Kyle MacLachlan at that age, so they can give it a go. It kind of works. It looks a bit weird in some scenes.
There's a sort of tone of weirdness running throughout the whole thing, so it works. It works in that sense, yeah. He's a strange man, so yeah, the fact that he looks a bit strange, like, it plays into it a bit. But yeah, and speaking to people, like, who aren't really big fans of the video games, but, like, that's sort of things that, like, people really latched onto, like, oh, he's cool, doing his sort of, like, weird villain bit in this show. And I liked, the plot line, obviously, with the Ella Pennell character of her, like, coming out of the vault and, like, losing her innocence and, like, seeing the sort of harsh realities of the world, but trying to hold on to her own, like, North Star and moral compass and, like, realizing that her father isn't the person she thought he was, but then still, like, kind of wanting to bring him to justice on her terms is a good character arc. That's well done.
Yeah, no, that storyline broadly lands. To wander back to some of my other complaints, there are other bits that don't broadly land in the final episode. I'm probably going to do some spoilers now.
Go for it.
Unless anyone has any complaints. No one seems to. Here's a pause. Right. Spoilers for the last episode of Fallout. I guess, although I'm going to be very broad about my spoilers, a lot of the storylines end up being thrown to next season we're not really going to tell you anything about that way. There's a lot of just, there's a higher level of the conspiracy. The thing you were looking for isn't actually here. There's no real ending to this story. Yeah, apart from the story with Ella Pennell's character and her father, which does get, as I say, a good resolution and a good final scene. A lot of the rest of it just sort of goes, nah, we'll do that next year. Maybe.
Yeah, which is a disappointing note to end on.
Which was slightly annoying, yes, and does, to an extent, leave me wondering how much I even need to watch the next season, but we'll see how I feel in however many years when it comes around.
Yeah, if it does. I don't know if they've committed to making more of this. I mean, I kind of understand the desire to basically, like, leave it on a cliffhanger. Kind of like, we want to keep people invested. They want to go back more to find out. But what like, good storytelling is that you, like, build to a climax and resolve the things that you've set in motion, and then show how that will lead to new conflict in the future. How resolving something, the classic killing the king, now you've become the king, and you have to deal with all those problems. That's a good, like, throw to next season. This, not so much.
Yeah, bit of a middling review for Fallout, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, definitely don't rush out and watch this. Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to speak to someone who really loves the video games. I mean, if it's just they're good fun shooters and they do the mechanics of being a fun shooter well, and that just doesn't translate into, like, a drama show, then that's fair enough. But if people are invested in the world, it's a bit like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not that blown away by, like, 50s Americana culture. If it was, like, a post-apocalyptic version of something I was, like, more interested in, then maybe fair enough. But, like, I kind of got a bit tired of the beat. I mean, like, Joker Folie à Deux was, like, really terrible for this, but, like, a bit of kind of, like, something really dark or, like, shocking happens in this, Hobbesian post-apocalyptic world they live in. Cut to end credits with an incredibly saccharine 50s love song playing over it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, all right, I get it. The first time, especially in the first season, it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. And then, like, by this time, it's like, all right, okay, you've done this a bit. It's like one very specific aspect of, like, 50s culture. It's kind of those weird things when they're like, this is what everyone thinks the 50s was like, but it probably wasn't like that. I mean, most people in the 50s were probably listening to still, like, jazz records from the 40s in the way that very few people now listen to contemporary music. We listen to stuff in the 80s and the 90s. And I guess it's kind of riffing on the style, and it's like, it's like atom punk. It's, like, not supposed to be realistic, I guess. But, like, I guess I'm just not moved by this 50s Americana sci-fi take. I mean, like, Fantastic Four, I thought, just did it better. Maybe because they have more money because it's Disney, but
I don't think I could accuse this of not having money spent on it. The money is dripping off the screen.
That's actually a good point. And this is Amazon money, yeah. And all Marvel are famously a bit cheap, actually, yeah. So, no, I take it back. Fantastic Four does more with less. So, there we go.
I mean, my vague understanding, and again, this is uneducated, is that the Fallout games are more story-driven RPGs than blast-em-up shooters. So, maybe what people are into is more being deeply invested in the world and characters. I don't know.
All right. So, that was another episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence. Next episode 261, will also be our 10-year anniversary. Can you believe it? We've been nattering on for 10 years. I can't believe it, no. It does not feel like 10 years, I'll tell you that. Usually it's an anniversary, such as our 5-year special, or when we got to like 200 or 250. We do the old recommendation section, which long-term listeners of the podcast will remember. But this time we're doing with a slight twist, which is that we are recommending to each other something from the last 10 years. So something that has come into existence, been released into the world during the time this show has been coming out, but we have not covered before. So I'm excited to hear what Nick has to recommend me from the last 10 years.
Okay, well, even before we'd settled on this 10-year rule, I was vaguely thinking, okay, obviously it's going to be a comic. We've done a lot of the big superheroes, your Spider-Man, your Superman, your Hulk. But the one we haven't done, which is weird considering he's arguably one of the ubiquitous superheroes, is of course your man, the Batman. Not really got much coverage in comic form on this podcast. So I thought it was time to finally dive into Batman. And once we set the 10-year rule, there was really only one candidate for a big, definitive important Batman comic of the last 10 years. And in fact, not only the last 10 years, but the last 2 years. This is a comic which has not just done well as a quite good Batman comic, but is kind of credited with, not quite single-handedly, but close to it, pulling the comics, or at least the superhero comics industry, out of a bit of a slump it had been in for a couple of years. I speak, of course, of Absolute Batman by Scott Snyder and Nick Dragotta. We've covered before the Marvel Ultimate line, which is a kind of up-to-date reimagining of the character as if they were created now, and that's basically what Absolute is. This is DC finally doing that, a mere 26-ish years after Marvel did. So this is Batman reimagined from the ground up as a new character with maybe a slightly more over-the-top manga influence, maybe. It's an interesting comic. I'm excited to read it again, having read it myself once quite a while ago now, and see what Alistair thinks as well. So yes, that's what we're doing. The first 6 issues, the first complete storyline of Absolute Batman.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, this would be interesting. Yeah, funnily enough, very little Batman discussed in this podcast, certainly in comic form. I suppose we covered like the Batman and things like that. But yeah, I think we did the New 52. But that's, I guess, a more broader DC thing than just specifically Batman.
We did a one-shot called Rebirth, didn't we? Which was...
Yeah. That was it. Yeah, that was resetting a lot of plot lines, wasn't it?
Yeah, resetting the whole DC universe. And I think it had a bit of Batman stuff in it. It had quite a lot of Flash stuff in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is pure uncut Batman. Absolute Batman, some might say.
Excellent. So yeah, I'm excited for that. Yeah, it's obviously been like, for many people, the guy in comics. It's about time we do some Batman.
Absolutely.
Cool. And for my recommendation, it's something that we've discussed on the podcast. We've mentioned it as like influencing things and something that's been like around in culture, but yeah, haven't dived into explicitly. I think I might have talked about it in a recommendation section. But this is, yeah, something unusual, but something that had a big impact on me. I was going to do a film, but this is, although it is sort of visual media, sort of a film, but it's also sort of not. But I think we've talked about it enough, specifically in reference to TV show Severance. I think it's time that we dive into Kane Pixel's Backrooms.
Ah, okay.
Internet horror phenomenon of liminal spaces and weird other realities. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear what you make of this.
Okay, cool. I'm excited to watch this. I'm also excited to hear exactly what you're specifically recommending, but yeah.
So yeah, just a bit of context, I suppose, for people is that, so yeah, Kane Pixels is a YouTuber.
Oh yeah, you did this in the recommendations section probably a couple of years ago or something.
Yeah.
Time
exactly.
flies.
Yeah. He's a YouTuber, but yeah, does fiction via YouTube, these sort of found footage horror things. He's got a collection that's kind of assembled into a playlist that form like a narrative arc, but it's a kind of disjointed arc. So yeah, what I'm specifically recommending is, a specific YouTube playlist of collecting together some of the best of Kane Pixels material. For those who follow us on Blue Sky, I will tweet the link should you wish to watch along. I will also post it on my Instagram, so you can watch it there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know this has been a big thing that has come up a few times since you first mentioned it, so I'm excited to see how this has secretly influenced the whole of society.
Yes, and it's a good pre-season for apparently, I think next year, possibly later this year, there's Kane Pixels doing a film with A24, so might be some good setups for that.
Cool. It's going to be a dark time, guys. We're going into liminal horror and Batman. It's going to be hardcore.
Yeah. I think that really sums up the last 10 years in many ways.
Well, liminal spaces and Batman. Yeah, maybe.
And horror. And just darkness.
Descent into darkness, yes. As I have joked more than once before, yes. The start of the Modern Fantasy Violence podcast did not signify the beginning of a decade of renewal, to put it mildly.
No, yeah. All the halcyon days of February 2016.
Yes. Was this podcast a harbinger of the apocalypse? It's not for me to say.
Cool. That's all we have time for in this episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, please leave us a review in your podcatcher of choice. Please also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, 10 years worth of podcasting, as well as some written pieces and some bonus audio clips from those 10 years.
And if you like, you can also follow us on the social media. We are on Blue Sky and Facebook, where we will talk all about what we are doing and if we are going to manage to put out a podcast this fortnight. It's been 10 years and we've mostly managed it. And Alistair will also post a link to that YouTube playlist so you can join me in my journey into liminal horror if you like. And yep, you could also follow me on social media. I am nickbryan.com on the internet and on Blue Sky, and nickbryan.com again, but with the word dot rather than a dot on Instagram, where you can hear mostly about my upcoming launch of the Kickstarter for Courier Z Volume 2. If you enjoyed my dark comedy space comic from a couple of years ago, it's finally time for the sequel. That'll be at the start of March, which will be alarmingly close to when the next episode comes out. Must finish planning that. Come and get it.
Yes, and I can recommend the first issue of Courier Z and encourage everyone to back this so we can all read the second one. You can also, after you've backed Nick's Kickstarter, you can get more from me by following me on either Instagram, Blue Sky, or TikTok by searching for Alistair Ball. You can also find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, and you can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. And then you can join us in 2 weeks' time for our 10-year anniversary special, where we will be discussing Absolute Batman and Kane Pixel's Backrooms. Join us to find out what we made of those in 2 weeks' time. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.